Between his election and his inauguration, Abraham Lincoln grew a beard for the first time. But why then? How did it help save his life and his presidency? And how did it influence the history of board games? I'm Bob Summers, and this is a presidential story. If you were going to dress up as Abraham Lincoln, would you do so without a beard? No, it's part of his iconic look. But for most of his life, Lincoln did not have a beard. Abraham Lincoln was an odd-looking fellow, towering over everyone else with his gaunt face and large ears. Throughout his career, mocking his appearance was considered fair game. When he was running for president in 1860, a Houston newspaper described him as the leanest, lankiest, most ungainly mass of legs, arms, and hatchet face ever strung upon a single frame. The Charleston Mercury deemed him a horrid-looking wretch. Lincoln was not a vain man. He had a history of engaging in self-deprecating humor about his looks. When opponent Stephen Douglas called him two-faced during an 1858 debate for Illinois' U.S. Senate seat, Lincoln replied, "If I had another face, do you think I'd wear this one?" On October 15, 1860, a few weeks before the presidential election, 11-year-old Grace Bedell from Westfield, New York, wrote a letter to Lincoln. She wrote, in part, "I've got 4 brothers, and a part of them will vote for you anyway. And if you let your whiskers grow, I will try and get the rest of them to vote for you. You would look a great deal better, for your face is so thin. All the ladies like whiskers, and they would tease their husbands to vote for you, and then you would be president." On October 19th, Lincoln wrote back, asking about the whiskers. "Having never worn any, do you not think people would call it a piece of silly affectation if I were to begin it now?" Lincoln must not have thought it too silly, for he stopped shaving shortly after winning the election. By late November, he had started a pretty decent beard. By January, he was fully bearded up. On Lincoln's famous train trip from Springfield, Illinois to Washington, D.C. for his inauguration in February 1861, Lincoln stopped in Westfield, New York. When Lincoln addressed the gathered crowd, he had told the story of how one of their own had convinced him to grow the beard. He then called out, asking if Grace was in the crowd. She was. She was led to the front of the crowd, and Lincoln stepped down from the train. As the crowd parted, Lincoln and Grace met face to bearded face. Lincoln bent down and kissed Grace's cheek and said, "You see, I let these whiskers grow for you, Grace." For the most part, people thought the beard was an improvement. One report stated, "A vigorous growth of comely whiskers has entirely changed his facial appearance." A woman in his hometown of Springfield felt that his whiskers are a great improvement. But even if it was an improvement, some thought it didn't help enough. One paper, despite being pro-Lincoln, decided that even with a beard, the president-elect was still very homely. And some did not like the beard at all, but not for the reason you might think. Milton Bradley was a successful Massachusetts lithographer. His best-selling image was of young presidential candidate Abraham Lincoln, without a beard. Bradley had invested heavily in producing this image, and now that Lincoln had grown a beard, his inventory was worthless. Lincoln's beard almost led to Bradley's financial ruin. Desperate for a way to use his lithography machine to financially recover, Bradley decided to adapt an imported board game a friend had given him into something an American audience would appreciate. He called it The Checkered Game of Life. Within 6 months, he sold 45,000 copies, and the game company Milton Bradley was born. Today, Milton Bradley makes some of the most iconic games, including Scrabble, Chutes and Ladders, Candyland, Battleship, Jenga, Twister, Hungry Hungry Hippos, Yahtzee, and the reimagined version of the game that gave them their start, the Game of Life. All because of Grace Bedell's letter to Lincoln. As Lincoln's train neared Washington, D.C., he learned that a group of secessionists in Baltimore were plotting his assassination. Since Secret Service protection wasn't a thing at the time, Lincoln followed the advice of Allan Pinkerton of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. First, they would travel through Baltimore earlier than his publicly known itinerary indicated. He would also remain in disguise for the rest of the trip, wearing a different style hat, slouching to hide his height. And of course, he had this new beard. So, perhaps thanks to his whiskers, Lincoln avoided harm and arrived in Washington without incident. Grace's letter to Lincoln is now part of the Burton Historical Collection at the Detroit Public Library. Lincoln's response is in the collection of the Benjamin Chappell Family Manuscript Foundation. In 1999, a statue was erected in Westfield, New York, in what is now known as the Lincoln Bedell Statue Park. The park showcases unique bronze statues of Abraham Lincoln and Grace Bedell that depict the meeting between the president-elect and the girl who suggested that he grow a beard for his presidential campaign. Thanks for watching. If this video made you want to stop shaving, please help out the channel, like and subscribe. And please visit POTUS.com to learn more interesting facts about the presidents.